It was 2 in the morning. The city outside was dead, but in the sterile, cinder-block fortress he called a garage, Wrench was wide awake. His real name was Arthur, but he had not been Arthur in 20 years. He was Wrench, the treasurer of the Azure Skulls Motorcycle Club. A single cold blue fluorescent lamp hummed overhead, casting long dark shadows on the pristine concrete floor. Wrench hated mess. His tools were hung in perfect, obsessive order. His motorcycle, a custom build, was covered by a dust sheet, and on his steel workbench in the center of the blue light were stacks of cash. He was counting. This was his ritual. This was his worship. This particular stack was $10,000. It was the skim from the club's latest protection racket, and it was his. He ran a thumb over the crisp $20 bills. He felt the familiar surge of superiority. The other members, they were animals. They were loud, sloppy, and violent. Their president, Titan, was a bull, all muscle and rage. But Wrench was the brain. He knew they saw him as a quiet, boring number cruncher. He cultivated that image. It made his real work, the slow, patient bleeding of the club's treasury, so much easier. He had been doing this for 5 years. His personal hidden ledger was far more impressive than the club's just. A few hours ago, he had been at the clubhouse, a place he despised. It was filthy, smelled of stale beer and old leather. Titan had been roaring, slamming his huge fist on the bar. The numbers are down. Wrench, you told me this new racket would pay, and the numbers are down. The other members had looked nervous. Titan's rages were legendary and destructive. Wrench, however, had simply stood there, his face a perfect mask of calm, loyal concern. He opened his fake ledger, the one he kept just for them. He pointed to a line item. It is not the intake, Prez. It is the expenses, look. Ammunition. 5,002 new bikes for the prospects. That was 10. Then the incident with the Vipers. That cost us another 12 in community outreach. The police seizures are getting worse. He had lied so smoothly, so calmly. He had used their own chaos and violence as the perfect cover for his quiet, meticulous theft. Titan, unable to follow the math for more than 30 seconds, had simply grunted, "Fine, just fix it. Make it more." Wrench had nodded. "Of course, Prez, I'll squeeze them." And now, hours later, he was fixing it. He finished his count. 10,000. Exactly. This currency was his true escape plan. His ticket out of this life, away from these idiots. This was his god, and his garage was the temple. He lifted a heavy oil-stained rag from the bench, revealing a hidden seam in the concrete floor. He pulled a small ring, and a heavy steel plate lifted, revealing his true safe. He knelt, admiring the stacks already inside. This safe held his future. It held his contempt. He was about to place the new stacks inside when a sound made him freeze. A knock, faint, but definite, at his garage door. At 2 in the morning. Nobody, not even Titan, came here. This was his sanctuary. His heart hammered once, a jolt of pure paranoia. He quietly shut the safe, slid the plate over, and moved the rag back. He walked to the heavy steel door and looked through the peephole. His paranoia faded, replaced by cold annoyance. It was Kid, a young, scrawny prospect, barely 19 years old. The boy was shifting from foot to foot, his face pale and racked with a desperation that Wrench found pathetic. Wrench unbolted the door and opened it just a crack, keeping the chain on. The cold night air hit his face. "What?" he snapped. The kid flinched. "Wrench, Mr. Arthur, sir. I am sorry to bother you. I know it is late. Spit it out, boy," Wrench said, his voice flat. The prospect took a shaky breath. "It is my mom. She is real sick. The doctors, they say she needs this medicine. It is expensive, really expensive. I was wondering if maybe I could get a loan. An advance on my cut? I'll work for free for a year. I swear, please." I don't know who else to ask. Wrench stared at the boy. He could see the genuine pain in his eyes. He could see the shame of a son who could not provide. Wrench's hand, resting on the door, still had the faint, dusty feel of the $10,000 he had just counted. He had the power to save this boy's mother in his hand, and he felt absolutely nothing. No, that was not true. He felt disdain. He had worked for his money. He had planned. This boy was weak, coming to beg. "The club is not a charity," Wrench said, his voice as cold as the steel door between them. "We are a business. You don't have a cut, you are a prospect. You earn, you don't beg. Get out of here, and don't you ever come to my garage again." He saw the kid's face crumble. The last flicker of hope died in his eyes. He just nodded, his throat too tight to speak, and turned away, his shoulders slumped. Wrench shut the heavy door, his hand moving to lock the bolt. The sound of the metal sliding into place was loud and final. He had thousands in his hand, but his heart was completely empty. Listen, if you've ever held on to something so tightly, money, a job, a possession, that you forgot about people, type "search my heart" in the comments right now. Greed is a quiet poison, and Wrench was about to drink a full glass. He turned from the door, his heart as cold as the steel he had just locked. He walked back toward his workbench, ready to deposit his earnings and forget the entire incident. He reached for the rag to move it aside, but his hand stopped. A new feeling had entered the room. It was cold, a deep, unnatural, penetrating cold that was nothing like the night air. It was a cold that seemed to come from inside his own bones. He looked at his hand. He could see his own breath, a small white puff of mist. In his garage, in the middle of summer, what the he whispered. The single, cold blue fluorescent lamp on his desk began to flicker. It buzzed, a high, frantic sound. 1, twice, 3 times. Then, with a loud pop, it died. The garage was plunged into absolute total darkness. Wrench froze, his heart leaping into his throat. He was blind. He could hear nothing but the frantic beat of his own pulse. "Damn it," he hissed, fumbling on his bench for the heavy flashlight he kept there. His fingers brushed against cold steel. The flashlight. He grabbed it, his thumb searching for the switch. Before he could click it on, a new light appeared. It was not a flashlight, it was not a lamp. It was a soft white-blue glow, and it was coming from the far corner of his garage. The corner he never used. The corner filled with empty oil drums. He stared, his eyes straining in the darkness. The light was growing, intensifying. It was not electric. It was alive. It pulsed, softly like a breathing thing. And in the center of that white-blue glow, a figure was standing. It was tall, impossibly tall, its head nearly scraping the rafters. It was cloaked, wrapped in robes that seemed to be made of the same deep blue shadow as the corners of the room. Wrench's hand, the one holding the flashlight, began to tremble. His shotgun was under the workbench, 10 feet away. An eternity, the figure was absolutely still. Wrench hadn't heard a sound. The main garage door was still locked, chained, and bolted. He knew it was. The windows were barred steel. Nobody could have gotten in. The door is locked. The windows are barred. But someone is in the garage with Wrench. Who is this stranger? And how does he know about the money? You do not want to miss Chapter 2. Hit that like button if you feel that chill. Comment, show me the truth if you are ready to see what Wrench sees. Subscribe now, or you'll miss the divine reckoning. Wrench's blood turned to ice. The man, the thing, in the corner had not moved, yet its presence filled the entire space, pressing in on him with a physical weight. His training, his biker instincts, they all screamed one word: threat. He lunged, not for the flashlight, but for the workbench. His hand dove underneath, his fingers wrapping around the cold, familiar grip of the sawed-off shotgun. He kept loaded there. He ripped it out, jacked a shell into the chamber with a shaperson that echoed in the terrifying silence, and leveled it at the glowing blue figure. "Who are you?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "How did you get in here? I will shoot." The figure, still cloaked in shadow and bathed in a white-blue light that seemed to come from nowhere, did not react. It simply was. Then it spoke. The voice was not loud. It was not a boom or a thunder. It was quiet, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was in Wrench's ears, but it was also inside his head, vibrating in his very chest, and it said two words that shattered Wrench's entire world. "Arthur, we need to look at your books." Wrench's finger went slack on the trigger. Arthur. No one had called him that in decades. He had almost forgotten the name himself. And the books. It could not mean the club's ledgers. It had to mean his ledgers. The hidden ones. The shotgun suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his hands. He lowered it, his arms trembling. I don't know what you are talking about," he stammered, the lie sounding thin and pathetic even to his own ears. The blue-robed stranger, for that is what Wrench now saw him as, took one step forward. He did not seem to move his feet. He simply glided over the concrete floor, the blue light moving with him until he was standing in the center of the garage. "Lies are for men, Arthur," the stranger's voice resonated. "I am not a man." He raised one long, pale hand, not at Wrench, but at the workbench. "Let us see the true accounting." Wrench watched, his heart stopping as the heavy steel plate in the floor, the one he had just covered, began to groan. The concrete around it cracked as a force wrench could not see or understand pulled at it. With a loud screech of tortured metal, the plate was ripped from the floor and thrown aside, crashing into a wall. The hidden safe was exposed. The stranger raised his hand again. The safe door, half an inch of solid steel, buckled and tore off its hinges. Then, the money came out. Not in a rush, but in a gentle, horrifying float. Stacks of 20s, 50s, and hundreds lifted from the dark hole, rising into the air, fanning out in a wide arc around the stranger. Wrench gasped. But not at the sight of the cash. He gasped because he could now see the money as it truly was. In the stranger's divine, blue light, the cash was not green and white. It was filthy. Each bill was coated in a thick, shimmering, blue-black grime. A spiritual filth. It dripped an oily, dark substance that sizzled and vanished before it hit the floor, leaving behind the faint, acrid smell of a burn. It was the physical, visible residue of his greed. It was the stain of his sin. The stranger's light intensified, the blue glow projecting a new, terrifying image onto the flat, blank wall of the garage. Wrench saw a massive, ancient, golden scale, the kind he associated with pictures of justice. It was perfectly balanced. On one side of the scale, Wrench saw a small, flickering light appear. It was dim, pathetic, and frail. "That is your soul, Arthur," the stranger's voice explained, devoid of all emotion. Wrench watched, horrified as his soul, his very essence, was placed on one side of the great scale. The scale barely moved. Then, the stranger reached out and plucked one single, filthy $20 bill from the air. He held it up. The blue-black grime dripped from it, thick and heavy. He placed the single bill on the other side of the scale. Instantly, impossibly, the scale crashed down on the side of the money. Wrench's soul, that dim, tiny light, was thrown violently into the air, found to be lighter than a single solitary dollar. The dollar was heavier. The sin was heavier. His soul worth less than a single dirty dollar. He was spiritually bankrupt. I have to pause. We chase money. We chase success. But what is it costing our souls? If this vision is making you think, type "My soul is not for sale" in the comments. Wrench was seeing the true price of his greed, and the audit was just beginning. Wrench fell to his knees, the shotgun clattering uselessly to the floor. No, he wept. No, it is just money. It was just club money. They're animals. They didn't deserve it. It didn't hurt anyone. It didn't hurt anyone. It didn't hurt anyone. The stranger's voice was quiet, but it held a new, cold edge. The vision on the wall shifted. The scale was gone. Now, Wrench was looking into a hospital room. It was small, drab, and lit by the same kind of sickly, pale blue light as his own garage lamp. In a bed, an older woman lay, her breathing shallow tubes in her nose. And beside the bed, his head down on the mattress, was the kid prospect. He was not sleeping. His shoulders were shaking. He was praying, his voice a muffled, broken whisper. "Please, God, please, I don't know what to do. Just, please. Wrench stared, his mind unable to process the connection. What is this? He whispered. This is the hope you stole, Arthur? The stranger's voice boomed. The first time it had truly raised in volume. The sound shook the tools on the walls. You did not just steal from your brothers, you stole from him. The money in your floor was his mother's medicine. The cash you worship was his last desperate hope. You looked him in the eye with the price of her life in your hand, and you chose this. The stranger gestured to the floating filthy money. You did not just steal from men, you stole from the desperate. You stole from the sick, and in doing so, you stole from the God who sees. The vision of the hospital room faded, replaced by the blank wall. The stranger, the blue-robed, silent judge, stepped closer to the kneeling, weeping Wrench. Your earthly ledger is a lie. Arthur, you are a meticulous accountant, but your math is flawed. But the heavenly ledger, it is perfect. It is balanced to the last unseen sin. The stranger opened his hands, which had been hidden in his robes. A book appeared between them. It was large, bound in a deep, ancient blue leather, and it glowed with the same white-blue light as the stranger's eyes. It is time, the stranger said, for your final accounting. Wrench, his face streaked with tears and snot, looked up in abject terror. Number, please. I'll give it back. I'll give it all back right now. I'll take it to him. I'll pay, please. The stranger looked down at him, not with anger, but with a vast, cold, divine pity. It is not about giving it back, Arthur. It is about your heart. The stranger opened the glowing blue book. Wrench saw pages filled with names, written in light, and there, at the top of a new page, he saw his own Arthur. But next to it, where a clean, pure light should have been, there was a stain. A terrible, dark, spreading, blue-black stain, just like the one on the money. His name is in the book, but it is stained. What does that mean? Can the stain be washed away? What will be his final judgment? Chapter 3 holds the answer. If you believe in the power of repentance, hit that subscribe button. Comment, "Wash me clean" if you are praying for Wrench's soul. Don't go anywhere. Wrench was a broken man, kneeling on the cold concrete of his own garage. A place that had once been his fortress, and was now his judgment hall. He stared at the glowing blue book, at the dark pulsating stain next to his name. "What do I do?" he cried, his voice a raw, broken whisper. "How do I fix this? How do I wipe that stain away?" The blue-robed stranger stood over him, a pillar of divine, unbending light. The stranger's voice softened, losing its cold, judgmental edge and taking on a tone of instruction. "The money is not the sin, Arthur. It is only the symptom. The love of it is the disease. Your heart is the ledger that must be changed. This book," the stranger said, closing the glowing blue-bound volume, "is only a reflection of that one. What is written in your heart, Arthur? That is what must be washed." Wrench looked down at his own hands, hands that had counted so much stolen cash, hands that had shut a door on a desperate boy. "Wash it," Wrench pleaded. "Please, wash me." The stranger looked at him for one long, unblinking moment. Then, the white-blue light that filled the room began to contract, pulling back into the stranger as if he were inhaling the very light he projected. The glow faded. The cold receded. The stranger and the book, they did not walk away. They simply dissolved. They dissolved into the shadows, leaving Wrench alone in the silence. He was in total darkness again, but only for a second. The ambient light of the city outside, which he had never noticed before, filtered through his high, barred windows. The garage was just a garage. The tools were on the wall. The shotgun was on the floor. But something was different. The safe, ripped open, was still there. And the money floating in the air before was now just a chaotic pile of paper on the floor. But it was not normal. To Wrench's new, terrified eyes, every single bill, every 20, every 100 pulsed with a faint, sickening blue-black light. It was the stain. The grime. The sin. He could see it. It was real. He stared at the pile of filth that he had once worshipped. He felt a wave of nausea so profound he had to turn away and gag. He had built his entire life on a pile of spiritual garbage. The stranger's words echoed in his head. "Your heart is the ledger." He scrambled to his feet, his legs shaking. He was no longer a cold, calculating treasurer. He was a terrified soul who had just seen the books, and his account was in default. He did not hesitate. He did not think. He only acted. He grabbed 2 large, empty canvas tool bags from a shelf. With his hands shaking in revulsion, he began to scoop the pulsing, filthy money into them. He did not count it. He did not look at it. He just stuffed it all in. Every last stolen dollar. He zipped the bags, threw them over his shoulder, and ran to his motorcycle. He ripped the dust cover off, his hands fumbling with his keys. He kicked the engine to life, the sound a roar that was nothing compared to the roaring in his own ears. He did not even bother to close the garage door. He sped out into the night, the heavy bags of sin slapping against his back. He did not ride toward the hospital. He did not ride toward the state line. He rode straight, fast, and terrified to the one place he had just betrayed, the Azure Skulls Clubhouse. He burst through the front door of the bar 20 minutes later. The bike was still ticking from the hard ride, left at the front curb. The bar was full. Titan was at the head table, drinking. The old guard and the young prospects. They all looked up as Wrench stumbled in, his face pale, his eyes wide and wild, the 2 heavy bags in his hands. "Wrench, what the hell is wrong with you?" Titan started to say, annoyed at the interruption. Wrench walked, his boots heavy, to the center of the room, right to Titan's table. He dropped the 2 bags on the table. They landed with a heavy thud. Cash spilled out onto the sticky wood, the bills pulsing with that same awful blue-black light that only Wrench could see. The entire club, 30 men, went silent. "What is this?" Titan asked, his voice now dangerously low. Wrench looked his president in the eye. His hands were trembling, but his voice was clear. "It is yours," he said. "It is all of it. I stole it from all of you. For years." He pointed at the money. This is my confession. I am done." He just signed his own death warrant. The club's punishment for thievery was not excommunication. It was death. A slow, painful, public death. But Wrench, having just stood before a divine judge, was more afraid of God's judgment than man's. "Let me ask you, what secret are you holding onto that you need to confess? What truth needs to come to light?" Type "I confess" in the comments as a prayer of release. Wrench put his life on the line. And what happened next shocked everyone. The silence in the bar was absolute. You could hear the hum of the beer cooler. Men had their hands on their knives, on their guns. They were looking at Titan, waiting for the signal to tear Wrench apart. Titan, for his part, was staring at Wrench. He was not just looking at a thief. He was looking at a man he had known for 20 years, a man who had just calmly, and with terror in his eyes, admitted to a sin that should have him running for his life. Titan was baffled by the total, insane surrender. He stood up, his shadow covering Wrench. "You stole from me?" Titan whispered. Before Titan could give the order, before a single hand could move, Wrench did something even crazier. He plunged his hand into the pile of money on the table, grabbing one large, thick stack. He held it up. "This one," he said, his voice shaking. "This one isn't for the club." Titan's eyes narrowed. What? Wrench, holding the stack, turned his back on Titan. He turned his back on 30 armed, furious bikers, all of whom had a death sentence in their eyes. He walked out of the bar. No one moved. They were so completely stunned by the sheer audacity, the sheer madness of his actions that they just let him walk. He got on his bike and sped away, the stack of money now in his jacket pocket. He rode, not home, but to the city hospital. He ran inside, his leathers and boots looking alien in the sterile, quiet environment. He found the intensive care unit. He found Kid asleep in a plastic chair in the waiting room, his face stained with dried tears. Wrench looked at the boy, and for the first time, he did not feel contempt. He felt a deep, crushing shame. He went to the front desk where a tired nurse was working. "The woman," he said, "the one that boy is here for, her bill. How much is it?" The nurse looked up, annoyed, and then her eyes went wide at the man in front of her. "Sir, I can't." "How much?" he demanded, pulling the stack of cash from his pocket. He paid the entire bill. In cash, it was thousands. He paid for the medicine, he paid for the room, he paid for everything. He took the remaining bills, a few $100s, walked over to the sleeping kid, and tucked the money gently into the pocket of the boy's jacket. He did not wake him. He did not say a word. He just left. He had made his first restitution. They found him the next day, the club. They did not kill him. Titan had given the order. A confession that public, that spiritual, it had spooked them. They beat him. They broke his ribs, his arm, his face. They took his cut. They took his bike. They took his keys. And they dumped him on the side of a road, declared outlaw. He had lost everything. His position, his friends, his money, his entire identity. He was no longer Wrench. The story ends 6 weeks later. He is just Arthur, a simple mechanic, his arm in a sling, his face still bruised, working at a small independent garage. He gets his first paycheck. It is small. It is clean. That Sunday, he walks into a small blue-collar church, the one he passed every day and never saw. He sits in the back pew. When the offering plate comes by, he reaches into his pocket. It is small. He pulls out a single, clean, crisp dollar bill. He places it in the plate. As he does, the morning light streams in through the church's stained glass window. The glass is a deep, pure blue, and the light that lands on his hand is not cold. It is not judgmental. It is warm. And for the first time in his entire life, Arthur, his ledger finally balanced, is free. Wrench lost his riches, but he saved his soul. He traded his garage safe for a place in God's house. Greed is a chain, but repentance is the key. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button and comment Amen if you believe grace is greater than greed. God bless you, and we will see you on the next Ameno story.